Okay, it's not like 1 second.
Is it still working?
It's on. It's on. Let's see.
They do feel kind of.
It's on. Okay. Hopefully it's going to work just fine.
Now you're running down.
There's a table over there. You go over there, sit there.
Okay, let's plug this in also.
You try.
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Bruce is definitely very. I don't know why Bruce is so intense tonight. Okay. Yeah, what was in your tea? What was in your tea? Yeah, he needs a. He needs some mint. I think that's what he needs. Yes, he needs some mint. Hello, Barbara. How are you? If you're watching us, please say hi. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I'm wearing my matatai in honor of the occasion. Let's open up the document. What's the matter?
She went to the Dallas.
You're for Shlema. For Pesach, right? Just to get better quickly. Okay, tonight's learning will be for everyone there for Shlema. And tonight's learning will be in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi. Then Yosef, who's the Shama, should have an elevation. And let's see if we get any comments yet. Okay, Shira, Shalom, how are you? Hello, Merle. I'm glad you're on and you're watching us. Good evening. Hello, Harold. Shavua Tov. Hello, Heidi. Shavua Tov. Okay, we got people on all channels. We're good to go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. Delicious, Robert. Perfect. Natural. You got a career ahead of you. Okay. Well, so should we start? The Pesach say tonight, it says in memory of Tzvi and Yosef, we're going to be learning tonight about how to tell a story. Now, any good storyteller will tell you that besides for what you say, it's how you say it. And part of how you say it is not only the words you use, but the props that you use. And sometimes more powerful than the words is the silence or the facial expressions. And sometimes even more than that is the props, the costumes, the stuff we pull out, especially if we're doing a show. Props can be very, very effective in creating a visual memory that people will remember forever. Forever. I remember once, as a side note, my father, hello, Art, hello, Heidi, thanks for the wave. But I don't see Kim on here. I hope that they're, hello, Marsha. I remember once it was on Purim, actually. Purim was like on the Shabbos, like this year. My father wore his Purim costume for a Shabbos sermon. Now, do you know what his Purim costume was that year? A prisoner from jail, like a striped uniform. And in his sermon, he came up with his, kapata, and his talis, and his shirt, and his tie, and everything. And then, in the middle of the sermon, he was talking about the power of clothing. The theme of the sermon was how God conceals himself and clothing conceals us, and the idea of costumes and God in costume. But how do I remember his speech? Because he made it real, he made it alive. And literally, as he was giving his sermon, his talis came off. And then his kapata, his coat came off. Hello, Sarah. And then his tie came off. And then his shirt came off. And you can imagine everyone in the show remember that sermon for many, many years, especially my sisters that were probably traumatized and needed therapy afterwards. But anyway, the point is the side effects, the props of the Seder are very, very powerful in helping us do a very good job at telling the story. So there's two stories we want to tell on the Seder night. The first story is the story of our slavery and of our exodus and how 3,400 years ago the Jewish people left Egypt. And so we need visuals, we need props to help make that story come alive in a real powerful way that our kids will remember forever. We're also telling another story, which is our story. Story of me and you. The story of us sitting in our own spiritual journey and how we ourselves are making this transition from whatever limitations or whatever obstacles and constraints and personal private Egypts we were suffering and struggling with last year or this year until Passover, and how we ourselves are going through our own inner exodus, our own inner transformation, our own inner journey from slavery to freedom. So tonight we are going to focus just on the items of the Seder plate. And I have to tell you that it's a little bit of a challenge because there's 6 different items on that Seder plate. And you can't really make a very powerful class on 6 different topics if you want to make it not just informational, but instructional. There's a difference. Many classes are informational. They teach you a lot of information, a lot of knowledge about a lot of things. Okay, so I can tell you about 100 things. I can tell you this and that and that and that. Chassidus, in general, the way we try and learn is to make the story instructional, which means it's actually instructions how I should behave, how I should internalize a message. That you can't take too many instructions at once, one at a time. So we'll get to that part, and maybe we'll just try and give each one of you the ability to choose something to focus on. I can feel for myself the item on the Seder plate that's been drawing me, that's drawing my attention, but let's start from the beginning and let's try and go through everything and let's try and give you as much information as we can to help you choose the direction that's going to talk most to you. Okay? But it'll be a little unique tonight because I'm not going to have a very clear one message. I'm going to kind of just lay it out there for you and just give you food for thought that you can take for your own digest in your own digestive system, so to say, spiritually. It's a little bit different. Anyway, so we have sit down at the Seder table, right? Of course, the table is set beautifully, all the china, all the dishes, everything is beautiful. And then comes the Seder plate. I actually thought that I had the one from Carol here in the office, but it was this one instead. Mine's in my that one's in my house. This is dirty and dusty, but you all know what this is, right? This is a Seder plate. And theoretically, if I would have more time, I would have gotten all the props and all the items. I would have actually had a piece of myrrh and a piece of lettuce and a piece of chavrosas.
Well, there's next in the freezer now.
Oh, now that I didn't know there were next before, and there's no hard boiled eggs at home, and I don't have opening chavrosas. So anyway, so you all know what it looks like. And you'll remember when you sit by the Seder plate, you'll see it. You also have it on the paper that I gave you all have in front of you. With the paper. For those that are sitting in the class, I'll share later. There's a paper you see very clear the items on the Seder plate. And so what we're going to do is, as we know already, everything in Judaism has a body and a soul. Everything, right? Everything in life. This podium has a body and a soul. It's made out of, I don't know, the molecules of wood, etc. And then it has its form, its purpose, that it's, I don't know, 5 feet tall, whatever it is, 18 inches wide, so it has its shape that it's used to put my laptop on that I can stand behind. The chair or the table has perhaps a similar body, but a very different form, a different function. Anyway, so the items on the Seder plate have...
Is the 5 foot whatever, the soul?
Yeah, the form. So in a physical inanimate object, we would call it the chomer and the tzura, the body and, matter and the form, the matter and the form. But in a more spiritual, you get something a little more alive. So yeah, it has its physical dimension and it has its purpose, its objective, its spiritual, its soul. So everything in the universe has these two aspects. So from the most inanimate object, like this inanimate podium that I'm standing and leaning on right now, that has a body of wood, has a form or a soul, which is its purpose, its objective, how you're meant to use it. And then you have in animals, you have a body and a soul, and you have in plants and animals, a body and a soul, and then people. And in the items of Torah, every message, every verse of Torah has its body, has its word, has its object, and has its purpose, its message, its meaning for us. And so the 6 items on the Seder plate, they all have a body, and they all have a soul. So let us begin with the body, because you can't get to the soul of the body. Without the, some Jews try that. Some Jews try just the spirituality of Judaism without the body, without the rules and the rituals and the commandments. Spirituality without a grounding and foundation, it's like electricity without a instrument. Electricity is without a refrigerator, without a TV, without a computer. It's just going to electrocute you. Electricity in a structure, in an object, that's very effective. And I'm getting a little distracted, but that's a very important point to remember. But anyway, so let's go. So we have a body and a soul for everything. And so as we go through the 6 items on the Seder plate, I'm going to go through all 6 of them, beginning actually with the item underneath, which is the matzah. I'm going to explain to you its significance. I want you to understand that I'm going to explain the significance of every item, both from slavery and from the aspect of freedom. And then hopefully we'll still have time left, although we don't even know what happens. If time left, we're going to get into into the spiritual reality of each of these items on the Seder plate, as explained by Rabbi Yitzchak Lurie by the Arizal. Okay? So let us begin. The first item we have on the Seder plate is actually not on the Seder plate. It's actually, of course, a rabbi would have to say that. I would have thought of that before. I made a whole joke. But the first item on the Seder plate is not on the Seder plate. Where is it? Under the Seder plate. And what's under the Seder plate? The 3 matzahs. We have 3 matzahs. And by the way, we all know the matzahs, right? That's the food that the Jews ate when they left Egypt. The reason why we eat matzahs is because the matzah, the dough of the Jews, didn't have a chance to rise. So they were rushed to leave Egypt in such a haste. And we read in the Haggadah on Pesach night that the Egyptians were hurrying them, that the dough didn't have a chance to rise, and that's why we eat matzah. But really, the matzah actually contains 2 different dimensions. On one hand, what is the matzah called? Bread of health is in the Zohar. It's in the Torah, in the Talmud, in the classic Judaism. What is the description of matzah? Bread of affliction. Lechem oni, or a poor man's bread. You know what's called poor man's bread? When you buy it, you become poor. Unless you go to Chabad and Chabad gets poor giving it to you. But otherwise, it's called a poor man's bread because to buy a pound of matzah, it's for $25. That you go poor buying. Anyway, that's just a joke. Every joke has some truth to it, though. But so it's called a poor man's bread. Why? Because the Jews in Egypt, as slaves, what do they eat? Matzah. That was the food of slavery. In fact, even till today, you can go to the British Museum and you'll see loaves of Egyptian bread that's preserved in the tomb of the kings and the nobles. And surprisingly, it looks like a round matzah. Now, the kings had a thicker matzah, more like a pita. It was a little more doughy, a little more soft. But slaves didn't get soft, doughy bread. They got a bread that was thinner, quicker to cook, so they can get, or bake rather, so they can get more time of slavery out of, get them to keep on working. They didn't want your slave sitting around for a long time making a thick dough. Give them a very thin dough. They baked it. When we were in Israel, we watched you on that trip where we went to Israel land and we made like the pita on the. They had like a little fire, like a pan. The boon, whatever it's called. You can make. Anyway, the point is you can make the matzah. It's very easy to make quickly. So the bread of the matzah that we eat is meant to remind us of the bread of affliction, the poor man's bread. And in fact, we say at the beginning of the Seder night, Hey lachma anya, the achal avasana ba'arad Mitzrayim. This is the bread of affliction that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. And so actually in the Seder night, the foundation of the Seder plate is matzah, which is both bread of affliction, the bread we ate before we left Egypt, the bread we ate when we were slaves, who weren't given proper, good, healthy meals, we were given thin matzah. And it's the bread of redemption. It's the bread we ate because our forefathers were being so rushed and experienced such an unbelievably fast, quick, amazing redemption that they didn't even have time for the dough to rise. So the same matzah is both bread of affliction and is also bread of freedom, bread of redemption, bread of the haste upon which we left Egypt, upon bread that reminds us of how quickly our miraculous exodus took place. Okay? Now, just to explain something, more in the body. Oh, shalom, Kim and Michael. Glad you're watching. Hello, Stephanie. Hello, Shira. Hello, everyone that's watching. Hello, Carmen. So we have how many matzahs? 3. So before I get to any spiritual reasons for the 3 matzahs, on a technical, legal, halachic body dimension, why do we need 3 matzahs? Simply, why do we need 3 matzahs? For the spiritual significance. Sometimes we know the spiritual more than... So we know, what are we going to do with the kiddush? Let's go through the Seder for a second. We're going to sit down after we make kiddush, we wash our hands, we do the vegetable, and then what do? We break the middle matzah, and we hide the bigger piece for the afikomen. And the smaller piece, which is again the poor man's bread, because the poor man has a little bit of bread, is the bread upon which we say the story of Haggadah. The whole story is said over that poor man's bread. Now we're finished saying the whole story, the whole Magid. It's time to make hamotzi and to begin the meal with the matzah. Now, when we make hamotzi on a Friday night or on a Chag, on a holiday, how many challahs do we need to have? 2. It's called lechem mishnah, a double portion of bread. It's a requirement to have 2 whole challahs, 2 whole loaves, when you make hamotzi. Now, we already broke the middle one. So if we would only have 2 matzahs to start, how much would we have now by the time we make the blessing on hamotzi? 1 1/4, 1 1/2. So in order to have 2 whole matzahs when we make the blessing hamotzi, we have 3 matzahs to start. So one of them gets broken, gets hidden away, and we still have 2 whole matzahs. And in fact, when we make the blessing hamotzi in the Seder, we hold all 3 matzahs, meaning we're holding 2 whole matzahs. The second blessing, which is going to be the blessing specifically on the mitzvah of eating matzah, we drop the bottom matzah. We let go of the bottom matzah. So the blessing on the mitzvah is on the broken matzah. Okay. And now when we eat the matzah, we have to eat from all 3 matzahs. So the middle one's going to be the afikomen. But we eat matzah twice. We eat matzah for the mitzvah, and then we eat matzah for the sandwich, which we're going to get back to in a few minutes, right? We have the korach, which is a sandwich. So when we eat the first matzah that we eat from the top and the middle matzah, and the bottom, and when we do the sandwich, we eat that from the bottom, the third matzah. Okay, you guys follow that? Okay. So that's the matzah that we have on the bottom. It also represents the Kohen, the Levi Yisrael, all the different kinds of Jews, every kind of person is there, but we'll get to that later. I'm not going to get to that. I'm not going to talk about that. That's the matzah, the body, the 3 foundations on the Seder. Then comes, I should really share my screen for a second. What comes on the top right corner? On the top, we call a shank bone. Now, I actually don't know, what does a shank bone mean in English? What's the word shank bone? I know what the Hebrew word is. What does shank bone even mean? I think it's a leg, right? The leg of a lamb. Okay, so Bruce is a chef, and Bruce says it's a femur bone. The femur bone is the leg, the leg of a sheep. Now, guess what? Has anyone here on their Seder plate ever put a shank bone on their Seder plate?
Yes.
You put the actual leg of a lamb on your Seder plate.
Leg of lamb, a bone in leg of lamb, and we use that bone.
So David over here is very religious. He actually had a real lamb leg bone on his Seder plate. But Marsha just walked in a few minutes ago. She said, now we have this raya. She came from the Grove or Rome. I don't know where you came from. Foodery. Okay, from Foodery. Yeah, from Foodery with chicken necks. Chicken necks. Ouch. That's what we use. We use the neck of a chicken. And I don't think it's only a Chabad custom, although I may possibly be wrong. I think it's more universal, except for Saradan. It's universal, right? For sure. I'm pretty sure Ashkenazim use a chicken neck as well. I don't think it's exclusively Chabad, but that's what we use. That's correct. We use a chicken neck, and we call it a zroa. Now, so let's explain first the body. Again, before I get to the significance even. Neck is not zroa. Very good. So Sarah, who speaks Hebrew, Bruce is a chef. You're the Hebrew speaker over here. And you'll tell us that zroa means what? An arm. An arm. He has a hand, but it's close enough. Yeah, it's okay. The zroa means an arm. It doesn't mean a leg. And we're using a neck, which is not the word zroa. So why are we calling it zroa? Excellent question. Give me 1 minute. And I was going to explain it. But first, let's just understand what are we doing and why are we doing it. So the reason for the zroa, this piece of meat bone that we have on our Seder plate, is to remember what? The Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering that our forefathers would eat, not only in the temple, but in the original first year that we sat in Egypt. God appeared to us on the 10th day of the month, actually on the beginning of the month. So on the 10th day, take a sheep or a lamb, tie it to your bed, check it for 3 days, and you slaughter it on the 14th. And we experienced our very first Pesach Seder where? In Egypt before the exodus, right? We put the blood on the doorpost, the blood of the sheep we put on the doorposts, and that's when God passed over, etc. You all know the story. So, and then every single year, when we had a temple, the mitzvah, the primary mitzvah of Passover was to eat matzah and maror with the Pesach lamb, the carbon Pesach. That was the primary mitzvah. Now, today, unfortunately, we don't have a temple, and so we can no longer bring an offering, a carbon. So there's no carbon Pesach today. Not only do we not bring a carbon, we don't want to give the impression, although I know the Sfardim have a custom to eat the lamb and to slaughter and all that, our custom is specifically not to even give the impression that we're eating the carbon Pesach outside of the temple, outside of Jerusalem, and therefore we don't eat any lamb on Pesach on purpose, at least by the Seder, and we don't eat anything roasted. The lamb, the carbon, the Pesach offering was roasted. So the meat that we eat is cooked, etc. We don't roast any food. So therefore, became the custom not to use a leg of a sheep, but to use a bone that has very, very little meat. Specifically, a bone that has very little meat. Why? Because what we're putting on the Seder plate is not to be eaten. It's purely symbolic. And we don't want someone to think, oh, we're going to eat this, because we don't eat a Karban Pesach because we don't have a temple. And so therefore, of all the bones of an animal that have the least meat, the neck bone of a chicken has the least meat. And even in that, some people take off the chicken, the meat. I know that the Rebbe, when he would make his Seder plate, people would be at the Rebbe's Seder, he got, the neck bone, and he would sit and pick off as much of the meat as he could. He would take off whatever meat is on the neck bone. To begin with, he would take it off. Okay, so that is regarding the what we call in English a shank bone, but really what we use is the neck of a chicken, which has nothing to do with it, not with a shank bone, not with a leg, and we call it a zroa. We call it a zroa. What does the word zroa mean? Arm. And what famous verse is connected to a zroa? Exactly. It says when God took us out of Egypt, how did he take us out? Biyad chazaka, with a mighty hand, or bizroa nitvuya, and an outstretched arm. So we call it the zroa, and this is the answer to Sarah's question. The reason why we call this chicken neck, which is really a little, we broke the chicken's neck. We're calling it a zroa, which means an arm, is to remember how God took us out of Egypt. Bizroa nitvuya, with an outstretched arm, a mighty hand, an outstretched arm. So here too, in this, we'll call it the zroa, or the shank bone. We see both the symbolism of the fact that we're going, of the fact that we were in Egypt, of remembering the Paschal offering that we ate while we were still slaves in Egypt, and we don't have a temple today, so it's only a zecher, it's a remembrance of what was. But at the same time, we call it a zroa. What's a zroa? The idea of God redeeming us and saving us with an outstretched arm, a mighty arm, etc. Got it? There's more to say, but we're going to stop with that because, again, we're going to try and go through all 6 twice tonight. Not once, but twice. Next comes the second side of the Seder plate. What's on the second side of the Seder plate? The egg. This is on the left side. Who knows? What does the egg represent? Anyone? Looking at the comments. Good evening, all you watching. Anyone know? Good evening, Rika. Anyone know what does the egg represent? What did you say?
Divorce, marriage.
You're jumping into spirit. I'm saying simply, what does it represent?
The circle of life. The circle of life.
You are both correct. Both of you are correct. The egg does represent the circle of life. And in fact, that is why it is a custom that when a person is in the morning, when they come home from a funeral, the first food that they eat is bread and a hard-boiled egg. Because a hard-boiled egg represents the circle of life, which is exactly both said correctly. We also have a custom to eat the hard-boiled egg on the evening before Tisha B'Av. The Sud HaMafseket, when we're in a state of mourning, we eat a hard-boiled egg dipped in ash. It's a food of mourning. But guess what else it represents? It represents the reason why we eat, your correct art. The reason why we eat, when we have the egg on the Seder plate is to remember the Karban Chagiga. Now, what's a Chagiga? Those who weren't paying attention. Chagiga is a holiday offering, a festival offering. So we have a rule that when you eat the Pesach offering in the temple, you have to eat it on the full stomach. It's like the Afikoman was eaten, full. It wasn't because they were hungry. So how would they make sure to have enough food that everyone in the entire family or families together, plural, could eat enough food and then eat more afikomen after to be stuffed, to be full? They would offer additional holiday offerings called the Karban Chagiga, the holiday celebration offerings. And these were obligated to be brought on the holidays. So besides for the Paschal lamb that was offered at the temple on the holiday of Pesach, we also have the Karban Chagiga, the holiday offering, the festival offering that was brought. It was a peace offering. They would eat from this animal as well. So to remember the festival offering, we have an egg, which is very, very interesting. By the way, our custom is, even though we don't eat the egg during the actual Seder ceremony, Chabad custom is that the first thing we eat before the meal is a hard-boiled egg. We dip it in the salt water, which, by the way, tastes good. After you ate all that matzah, salt water, like, oh, I get some water in my mouth. Even if it's salt water, it's like, because the matzah is dry. The matzah is, so the custom is our custom is we put out more eggs so everyone can have an egg, a hard-boiled egg, and we dip the egg into the salt water and we eat the egg. So on one hand, the egg is reminding us of what? The celebrations that took place in Jerusalem in the good old days, in the happy times, when the Jews were all coming together to our capital, to Jerusalem, to rejoice and bask in the glory of the holiday of the glory of the Shekhinah. At the same time, of all the food that we use to remember the Karban Chagiga, this holiday celebration, what's the food we eat? The round egg of mourning, a remembrance of the sadness. So on one hand, it's a happy thing. It's a reminder of our happy times. At the same time, it's also a mourning, a sad thing. By the way, there's another time that you're all familiar with where we do something very similar, where in our rejoicing, we do something sad to remember that we don't have a temple. We do an act of mourning at a happy occasion. What is that? Correct. At every wedding, we have a custom to break the glass under the chuppah. What's the reason why we break the glass? Not just to warn the husband never to try putting his foot on ever again. That's not why. We break the glass to remember the destruction of the temple during our happy occasion. And so too, when we're sitting at the Seder table and we're rejoicing and we're celebrating and we're drinking and we're free men and we had a temple, we brought the peace offering and the festival offerings, at that very moment, we eat a food of mourning to remember that right now the temple is destroyed and something is missing. Okay, that's the hard-boiled egg. Depending on the other messages, the egg, the more you cook it, the harder it gets. I just saw a clip today, actually, on Facebook, a short reel. There's a guy from Montreal. His name is, I'm already saying it. So one of the messages, why of all the foods of mourning, there's many round foods, right? An apple is also round food. Right, lentils are round food. Many of the round food. I don't know. Why an egg? So an egg is unique. Normally, most foods, when you cook them, what happens when you cook them? You cook an apple. What happens when you cook an apple? It gets softer. So an apple is round. That's true. And the lentil is round. But the longer you cook a lentil, the softer the lentil gets. And the more you cook the apple, the softer it gets. An egg, the more you cook it, the harder it gets. And a Jew in suffering and a Jew in mourning is the same way. The more you cook us, the stronger we get. So I saw this very good clip today of a young Chabad guy who was not always religious, and he actually used to be in the nightclub business, which is not exactly a business for a good Jewish boy, but he was making good money. He was in the nightclub business. He was running a nightclub. He was working in the nightclub. I don't know exactly what he was doing, but he had a lot of Jewish friends that hid their Jewishness. It was not a place to show off your Jewish identity. And eventually he felt very empty and meaningless in this career. He ended up becoming religious. He's now married with a Chabad. He came about tshuva. He has a beautiful family. He lives in Montreal. He makes videos. He said he was thanking all the anti-Semites in the world. He said, the anti-Semites, you guys are doing a great job. Because all my friends from my previous lifetime, they would hide their Jewishness, that, were embarrassed of their Jewishness. Because of you anti-Semites, now they're becoming proud Jews that are showing off their Jewishness. In fact, he says, there's people that I know my whole life, I never knew they were Jewish. And suddenly now I'm discovering how Jewish they are, how they're standing with pride of wearing the Am Yisrael Chag and on Facebook and showing off their Jewish identity. So they keep it up. The more you push us and the more you oppress us, the more you bring out the Jewish spirit that I'm seeing in my friends, that until you, it was hidden. So that's the idea of an egg. The more you cook it, it's actually a very beautiful message in and of itself. Maybe I'll speak about it. But this is the story of the Jewish people after October 7th. And the more we get pushed, and the more that there's this anti-Semitism, the more that this is waking us up to, not only us that are here in the class, but all of these Jews. I can think of so many even famous names of Jews that are famous actors, etc., who were not such proud Jews or such active Jews. And the last year and a half, you've seen the spirit of their Jewishness and of their neshama burning forth in a very, very powerful way. Because when you cook a Jew, it doesn't disintegrate. It doesn't turn to applesauce. It turns into something stronger and stronger. Anyway, that is a little bonus, little dessert, even though not even on the first course. Okay, anyway, next we come to the middle of the Seder plate. And what, my friends, is on the middle of the Seder plate? We got mar. So let's say mar for a second, even though here it says horseradish. What exactly is mar? Mar means bitter herbs, bitter. Now, it may surprise you to know that in the original times of the Talmud, they did not use horseradish for mar. What would they use? Lettuce. Lettuce. Yeah, I said it might surprise you, that face. Yeah, lettuce. The mar of ancient times was actually not horseradish. It was lettuce. Why is lettuce the best food? So first of all, they didn't have horseradish. Only like in Eastern Europe, they didn't have lettuce. Horseradish grows underground. It's a root. So horseradish is available when Jews were living in Poland and in Russia and in all these Eastern European countries where they couldn't get a fresh vegetable. But besides for that, ideally and really, you should be using lettuce for mar. In fact, our custom today, Chabad custom, is to use both. So we don't only eat the lettuce because if you eat a whole, you need to eat a kazayas. A kazayas is an olive, it's like an ounce. You eat all that in horseradish, you'll be choking and coughing and all that. So we take lettuce. No, the lettuce is ideal. We take also the horseradish because it's more bitter and you want to taste the bitterness of the slavery. Right, the reason why we eat mar is to remember the slavery and the bitterness that we're suffering in Egypt. But the ideal food is lettuce. Why? Exactly, that's correct. So the leaves of romaine lettuce are not bitter. But the stem, which if you leave it in the ground, it turns hard and becomes bitter. And so too, when we started our enslavement, how did Paro trick us into becoming slaves? He tricked us by saying, come, we need patriots to come help us build the country. We don't have storage houses. We don't have proper defense, barricades. And he himself, Pharaoh himself, came out to the pits where they're going to make the bricks for the pyramids. He himself came with a, not a tie, with a shovel hanging on his neck. Like the Matatayas in the spirit. He came with a shovel. Hanging from his neck. And he himself was sweating, so to say, in the you see like the politicians in the soup kitchens there for like 5 minutes to get a picture, and then they go back to their air-conditioned SUV. But for the 5 minutes, he came to take pictures, and he himself was there with a shovel hanging from his neck. And all the Jews were helping, and they got to show the good Egyptian people. And then that's how it started. They had to keep on doing the quotas, and then they stopped getting paid for it until they were enslaved. It took many years. It wasn't like a one-day thing. It was an 80-year process. But this is the story of the Jews being enslaved in Egypt. And so, too, this is the story of our life, that any sin, anything bitter, very rarely starts off bitter. Anything bitter. Think about something bitter. An abusive relationship, a negative, a bad habit, addictive, anything. Doesn't start bitter. It starts geschmack. You know what geschmack means? Delicious. Exactly. It starts sweet. How do people get into bad habits? Because they wake up and say, I want to do something bad. Say, I want to be in an abusive relationship. Say, I want to be a lazy, ineffective. No, it starts off sweet. And then we eventually become enslaved to that sweetness until it's no longer sweet. Now it's a bitter stalk and a bitter stem, which in the middle of the lettuce is very, very bitter, but that's what we got sucked in. Okay? And so this stalk of lettuce is very, 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 very interesting in that what? It contains both slavery, both bitterness, and sweetness, freshness. Both the idea of our slavery and the idea of our freedom. In the same stalk of lettuce. Right? The leaves themselves are crisp, they're sweet. However, especially the stalk is very bitter. Which, by the way, is also that you can't appreciate freedom until you taste bitterness. Right? You only appreciate the crispness and the sweetness of the leaves if you also have the bitterness of the stalk. You just have candy, you don't appreciate the candy. You have to have the bitterness to appreciate the sweetness, etc. Okay. So that's why you have to be like, I texted someone today, I was in the shul for a few days, so I'm sick. And he wrote to me, it makes me remember to be thankful when I'm healthy. You know, when you're sick, it reminds you to be thankful when you're healthy. So too, when you have the stem, which is bitter, that reminds you to be appreciative for the freedom. Okay, anyway. Next we come to what? Charosas. What is charosas? Oh, you love it. She loves it. What's the charosas? The mortar. So here, this is even the English word for charosas because it doesn't have an English word. What would be the English word for this? No English word. It's the mud. It's the clay. It's the Jewish dish that has there isn't even an attempt by American culture to try and. It isn't even like a cheap imitation of it, is there? It doesn't even exist. It's charosas. It's untranslatable and unimitatable. How's that? So what's charosas meant to symbolize? The mortar of the Jewish people that they used to build the bricks. How do you make bricks? You take mud, the Nile is near, by the river, and you mix it with salt and sand, straw, whatever. Cook it, bake it, unless you get 2 minutes to get bricks. So too, want to remember the bricks of our forefathers in Egypt. So what do? We take a mix of apples and pears and nuts, and maybe you have cinnamon or whatever you put in, but those are the 3 minimum, and wine. Those are the halachic requirements for charosas. It's apples, pears, nuts, and the wine. People added many other things. I don't think you have for sure apples and nuts and the wine. Some people do raisins, although raisins is grapes, so that's the wines. So what does it symbolize? I was trying to look into more to find all the verses that I couldn't find actually in the Pir. I know that in Kabbalah, the Pir also they have redemption, but the apple is very important. What does the apple represent? What? But did I skip? 1 second. We're doing good. Okay. Okay. Charos, so the apple is not the original sin. By the way, the original tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden was not an apple. Even though, not Michelangelo, what's the other famous non-Jewish artist, drew a picture of Adam and Eve in the garden with an apple tree. So from there became an apple tree. But guess what? That's an invention of a non-Jewish artist. There's a very, very famous verse. This is what the Gemara says. That
The smell of that name is the apple.
So part of the reason where it comes from, yes, is that it says that spiritually, chakal, tapuch, and kadishin, that the holy apple orchard, etc. But let's not get distracted with the Garden of Eden. This is nothing to do with the Garden of Eden. So there's a verse in Songs of Songs, Shir Hashir, chapter 8, which says, "Who is this who comes up from the wilderness, reclining upon her beloved? Under the apple tree, I awakened you, or I aroused you. There your mother was in travail with you. There she who bore you was in travail, was in suffering." So the Gemara tells us this verse where God is describing the greatness. It's like a poet, it's like a whole poem of love, where God is describing the love of this person who comes up under the apple tree, who comes up from the wilderness, reclining upon the beloved, who are under the apple tree. I aroused you is referring to the Jewish woman in Egypt. And they will come to their husbands who are tired after a brutal day of terrible, terrible slave labor, a day of suffering, of beating, of working in the hot Egyptian sun. And these men were too tired to go home, and they were too tired to have any sex drive, and any desire to be intimate with their spouses. And the Jewish woman knew that they allowed the men to be crushed physically, and they don't continue having children, the plan of the Egyptians to destroy the future of the Jewish people will be effective, will be successful. So what did these Jewish women do? They would go under the apple trees with the mirrors, and there they would put on their makeup, they would put on their eyeliner, and I don't know what they would put on, and they would beautify themselves before their husbands. And they would look in the mirror and say, look how beautiful I am. And they would get all dressed up and all pretty for their husbands. And they would go to meet their husbands in the fields that couldn't even come home. And there they would arouse their husbands with their beauty. They would be intimate with each other. And they would become pregnant and become pregnant there under the apple trees. And God describes this act of the woman as one of the greatest acts of sacrifice. The men were broken, and the woman didn't give in. The woman did not allow the oppressiveness and the despair of Egyptian slavery to stop them from continuing and ensuring the continuation of the Jewish people. And they went and aroused their husbands to continue having children. And God describes one of the greatest praise of the Jewish people under the apple tree. And so this is why the Gemara says, Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, we make the charosas out of the apples to remember the apple trees under which the Jewish people kept on having children. Not only that, there's another story in the Gemara. That the Jewish people would go to have their babies under the apple trees. What would happen to those babies? They'd be swallowed up in the earth. It's in the Haggadah. There's a verse in the Haggadah that talks about this, which tells us that during the time of slavery, they give birth under the apple trees. And once they were born, a miracle would take place where the earth would swallow them. They would be thrown to the Nile, and there the earth would swallow them. Not that they were thrown to the Nile, the earth would swallow them. And there in the underground caves, they would suck on one stone that would give them milk, and one stone that would give them honey. And that's why it says that you grew like grass from the fields. In the Haggadah, there's a verse. It says we grew like grass from the fields. That these Jewish children have been miraculous, they've been swallowed by the earth and not thrown into the Nile. They were kept alive by God Himself, who nurtured them, who mothered them, who fed them. When the Jews were leaving Egypt, all these Jews came up from out of the grass and went with the Jewish people out of slavery. So to remember this miracle of God taking care of the Jewish children, after I'll show you in the Haggadah. So we say it every year. It's one of those verses that people don't pay attention to. That every year we eat the charosas with the apple, which the apple represents. The charosas represents the mortar that we made of bricks of slavery. But in the mortar is the apples. And the apples are a symbol of the Jewish spirit, the spirit of the Jewish woman specifically, who did not allow the despair of their husband's slavery to stop them from continuing the Jewish people. And secondly, the miracle of us being swallowed up, the children being swallowed up under the orchard trees. That's what the verse continues. The verse says that you went, the mother, under the apple tree. I aroused you. There your mother was in travail with you. There she who bore you was in suffering, and she went to the apple trees to give birth, and the children were taken care of by God.
You should put honey in there.
There it is.
I guess there you go. Dates, raisins, sweet. There's many recipes, but every recipe of charosas is going to have apples in it. Because the apples is part of not biblical, it's not in the Torah, but in the Talmud describes the apples. It also describes the nuts, which I don't remember, I was trying to read, I didn't have enough time. The nuts is about also something about the eights, which is the idea of our symbol, of our freedom, and of course wine. And what is wine?
Not sure, a symbol of freedom. I thought they had the same equivalent thing as sin.
There is a symbol. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I don't know. There's something in there about nuts specifically. I don't know. It's not. I was looking. I couldn't find it. So I couldn't find it. And in the back of my head, it's about nuts. But for sure, the apples are famous. The apples in the Gemara.
Maybe that they're in a shell.
I don't know. And wine also is a symbol of freedom, of liberty. So the wine contains the color of blood, but it's also the blood of our freedom. We put the blood on the doorpost. That's why we went free. And wine's a symbol of a king. Anyway. Too much on that. Okay. So that's the charosas. And what do we have on the other side? Go back to our... one second, I close it. So on the other side we have karpas. What's karpas? So much more to say, but we're up. So the karpas is any vegetable that you want to use. 1 second.
Green vegetables.
What?
Green vegetables.
It doesn't even have to be green. It has to be a vegetable that we're going to dip into the salt water in order to remember the tears of our forefathers. Also, in order to make a blessing on the Borei Pri Adama, we don't want to make a blessing on the maror. So the vegetable of the maror, when we make the blessing Borei Pri Adama on the vegetable, we dip the vegetable in salt water. We have in mind that that blessing is also for the maror we're going to eat later on, which is why we don't eat a lot of vegetable. Just a little bit, because then we have to make a blessing in between. So we eat a little bit, not make an after blessing, and that's the Adama for later on. The point is karpas. The word karpas is actually two words. Perech, samach. The letters karpas is perech, means back-breaking labor. Samach of the 600,000 Jews that were suffering in slavery. Samach is 600,000. So 60, remember the 60 myriad, which is 600,000. So on one hand, the karpas is we're dipping in the salt water, the tears of our slavery, right? On the other hand, and this karpas is the idea of the Jews, the idea of the celery specifically, but also the idea of the Jews who were forced into back-breaking labor, and yet from that back-breaking labor, they went free. And I was reading, but I actually didn't put notes here. Who went free. We have to leave this for now. Who went free? Anyway, well, we're going to leave it for now. And then the maror at the end is the same maror as before. The bottom one, the same one as the middle one. The only difference is that what? What is it used for? The bottom, we don't call it maror. What do we call it? What do we call on the bottom of the plate? Chazeret. Chazeret, which is a bitter herb, same as a horseradish. I give a different English name. Difference is that the maror that we eat on the maror in the middle of the plate is used for what purpose in the Seder plate? The maror is eaten with the first time. Okay, let's go through the schedule for a second. We eat the matzah, right? We have the three matzahs. We eat the top matzah and the middle matzah for the mitzvah of eating matzah. After we finish doing the mitzvah of eating matzah, reclining and all that, we eat at least an olive's amount, which is probably about a half of a shmura matzah per person. Especially the matzah we're doing this year is very thin matzah. So you need to eat probably at least a half of a matzah, at least, to fulfill the obligation of eating the matzah after dark. What time is dark in Coral Springs, Florida? 8:13, right? 8:17. I think it's 8. I think the time of candlelighting is 8:17, but really it could be 8:13 if I'm not mistaken. So after that, we eat the maror. Okay? And then what do? Make a sandwich. 8:19. It's 8:17. We make a sandwich. Why do we make a sandwich? Because the mitzvah of eating matzah in the times of the temple was not to eat matzah. The mitzvah of eating matzah was to eat the matzah and the maror and the Pesach lamb all together. That's what they do in the times of the temple. That's how Hillel did it. So the mitzvah was really everything combined. But today, we can't do it all combined. Why not? Because today, the mitzvah of eating matzah is a biblical mitzvah. Today, the mitzvah of eating maror is a rabbinical mitzvah. Let me explain what I just said. And we're trying to rush for time because we're never going to get close to doing everything I wanted to say. But the mitzvah today of eating matzah has a separate source in the Torah. Besides the mitzvah of eating the matzah and the maror and the paschal lamb together, Torah tells us multiple times to eat matzah, which means that independent of the maror and independent of the paschal lamb, we have an obligation to eat handmade shmura matzah after dark on the night of our exodus. Not on the afternoon or the evening before, but on the night of our exodus. But then we have another mitzvah, which is no longer in effect today, in its biblical sense, which is to eat them all together. Today we can't do that because we don't have the Pesach lamb. The rabbis institute that even though we can't do the full sandwich of matzah and maror and carbon Pesach all together, the rabbis instituted we should still eat the maror. So today, eating the maror is a mitzvah, but it's not the mitzvah of the Torah. It's the mitzvah of the rabbis. And therefore, you can't mix a mitzvah of the Torah with a mitzvah of the rabbis. So we can't eat the matzah and the maror together. Each is its own mitzvah of its own scriptural source. So the mitzvah of matzah is the most important mitzvah. So we do that as its own mitzvah. The mitzvah of eating maror today is a mitzvah. We make a blessing. We make a blessing. It is a mitzvah in and of itself, so it's its own mitzvah, it's its own blessing, its own eating. And Hillel said, let's still remember how the original mitzvah was done in the times of the temple was all together. So we eat more matzah and more maror, but together. And pretending that there's a good piece of meat in the middle of it to make it all taste good. Pretend. Use your imagination. Okay? And so that's the difference between the maror and the chazaras. There's more to say, but let's stop here because I want to really get to the spiritual stuff. I'm going to go through this quickly because officially I have 5 minutes, and we'll go a little bit over, 7 minutes. But let us look at what the Arizal says. The Arizal says, am I still sharing my screen? No, not 1 second. Let's read what the Arizal writes. The Arizal says, this is from the Seder of the Arizal. And this is a translation. He didn't write it in English, obviously. Arrange the plate on the table by taking 3 matzahs and placing them one on the other. First, the Israelite, which is the lowest matzah. On top of it, the middle matzah, which is the Levi matzah. On top of it, the Kohen, the third matzah, which this represents the 3 intellectual faculties of Chochmah, Bina, Das. Let's stop to explain for a minute. Really, I should have maybe done, like, if I have another week, I'll do 2 classes, one on the body, one on the soul, but we don't have time, so we're going to do this quickly. And we'll do it quickly. There are 3 intellectual components, before even that. There's 10 parts to our psyche, to our spiritual psyche. What are the 10 parts to our spiritual psyche? Did you get the paper? Oh, yeah. What are the 10 parts to our spiritual psyche? 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. What are the 3 intellectual parts of our psyche? If you're familiar with Chabad, Chabad is an acronym for Chachma, Bina, Das. Okay. Right now, we don't have time to explain the difference between Chachma, Bina, and Das, but let's just say, and it's not relevant because all 3 matzahs get piled up on top of each other, and why the Bina is a Levi one, the middle one, which is the analytical one, which breaks it apart. Let's just leave it for very simple, that you have, thank you all those who are thinking of me, I'm not done yet, don't go away. So you have Chachma, Bina, Das, 3 intellectual faculties, which are represented by the 3 matzot that are underneath the plate. Now, the plate, which has 6 parts to it, is going to represent the 6 midot, the 6 emotions. And the plate will be malchus, I'll get there in 5 minutes. The 6 emotions. Now, you have to know something very, very important about the way the midot are structured. Before I even get to the specifics, we know that in Kabbalah, you have 3, what they're called the kav, 3 lines or 3 flows. You have the right side, you have the left side, and then you have the middle, which absorbs from both the right and from the left. This is a very basic idea. This is a very important idea. So on the right side, you have chesed, kindness, which is the idea of giving. The right hand is a giving hand. You have the left hand, which is small, the left, which is gevura, restraint, holding back. And then in the middle, you have, let's say in the body, you have the torso, and the torso receives from both giving and restraint. And what does that create? Rachamim, compassion. Or empathy is going to be lower. Compassion. Compassion means I'm not just giving you because I want to give. That's chesed. Chesed says I give you because I want to give. It's about me giving. Gevura holds back because I feel you're not deserving. It's actually about me holding back what you don't deserve. And only Gevura will also give, but only with judgment, only what you deserve to get. Compassion is not me giving because I want to give. It's me giving because I feel bad for you. So I'm giving you more than you deserve. You don't deserve my help. You're not entitled to it. You didn't earn it. You're not worthy of it. Maybe you need help because you screwed up and you made some terrible mistakes. So it's your fault and you should suffer the consequences. That's what judgment in the left side would say. And rachamim, compassion means even though I understand your problem. You understand where you don't deserve. I'm still going to choose to help you anyway. It's not blind giving. It's, I understand. Okay? So it's right, left, middle. The middle has to receive from both the right and the left. Correct? That's how it works. Receives from both the right and the left. And therefore it is lower than them. It's lower than them. In the Arizal Seder plate, the way the Arizal made the Seder plate is not in a circle. Yes, I understand the circle is more symmetrical and it looks pretty if you're making a nice Seder plate. So you'll find many Seder plates in Judaic stores in a circle. That's not the Kabbalistic Seder plate. The Kabbalistic Seder plate is like this, where you have the right and the left, and then the middle. Lower, the middle is lower than the right and the left. Center. So the Hebrew letters, the Hebrew vowel segel. Remember the segel right in the Hebrew vowels? So segel, there's 3 dots, 2 on the right and the 1 in the middle. Think about that too. So you have the right, the left, the middle. Whatever, I'm facing you this way, but the right, the left, and the middle. Understand? So that's how the Arizal Seder plate is situated. If you look at the picture that you have over here, it's right, left, middle, and that is the way the Seder plate should be done spiritually if you're trying to follow. If you want to spiritually express the emotions of your psyche on your Seder plate, that is the way it should be situated. So now what we're going to do is, we're going to look at the Seder plate. We know we have 6 emotions. You know what? Before the Seder plate, I'm going to do it this way. Make it easier, I think. Let's go through the 3. Let's do the first 3, and I'll go stop. We'll do it 3. So let's go look at our Seder plate. And we have on the right side, let's see if we can together, if we can figure out the right, the left, and the middle, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and why it is. So the right side is, we already said, Chesed, correct?
Yeah.
What is Chesed? Kindness, giving. What did we say is the word Zroa? Sorry, do you remember? What is a Zroa? The outstretched arm. We don't call it a neck, and we don't even call it a leg. We call it an arm, because it's an arm of giving. A Zroa, an outstretched arm of redemption. That is the idea of giving chesed to others. Okay? What's on the left side? What's on the left side, my friends? The hard-boiled egg. And what does a hard-boiled egg represent? The mourning, the getting harder, the cooking. It's the idea of discipline and it's gvura. It's checking and limiting the love. That it shouldn't be unchecked love. It's a remembrance of destruction. And that's the idea that in order to have healthy love, it has to be controlled and measured. Okay, now we have the middle. What's the middle? Mara. You're actually not going to figure this out on your own. We can try. So Mara is what? It's horseradish. That's true. But in the spiritual psyche of our souls, if we have the right and the left, it's chesed and gvura. What's the middle? Compassion. Tiferet. Tiferet is beauty, is compassion. So, my friend, how does bitter herbs reflect compassion?
Well, without, like you said, without knowing the bad, you don't know the good.
What's the point of eating bitter herbs? To feel for the other person. The reason why we eat the bitter herbs, we pretend like that's like bondage and slavery. Eating something bitter is the same thing as being a slave? No. Slavery is being whipped, being tortured, and being standing outside in the boiling sun making bricks. The idea of maror, the idea of eating the bitter herbs, is about the empathy that it elicits. It's about feeling for the other person. That's the foundation of compassion, that I'm able to feel your pain. If I don't feel you, then I won't have compassion for you. I have to feel you. I have to be aware of what it is you are feeling. And therefore, the way of Tiferet, the way of beauty, and the way of compassion is through crying out from feeling the pain of another person. That's why we have compassion for other people, because we feel for them. If we wouldn't feel for them, we wouldn't have compassion. You can have kindness to someone you don't care about. You can have kindness to someone you don't care about. You can have kindness to someone you don't like. I can't stand this person, I'll still be nice to them. I can be nice to starving children in Africa. You know what I'm saying? I'll make a donation. I feel, when do we feel compassion? We feel empathy. When we can relate to them, we can feel for them. That's when we feel compassion. Okay. Now, let me go very quickly. What are the next three before we go into the Seder plate? What are the next three emotions in our psyche? Before the Seder plate, let me just do it like in order. So we know Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes is much more famous, right? What's Netzach, Gvura, Netzach, Chod, Yesod? I know I'm rushing a little bit, I apologize. Netzach is victory, domination, endurance is called. My ability to persevere and to get what I want. It's a form of domination, a form of asserting myself over others. Hod, the opposite side, the left side. So this is the right thigh and the left thigh. The left side and the left thigh is the idea of submission, of surrender, of holding myself back to allow space for someone else. So Netzach is me asserting myself over you, not on an emotional level, but on a practical level, where I endure, where I persevere, where I, dominate. And Hod is where I hold back, where I surrender, where I let go, where I don't persevere, where I don't endure, where I let go. Sometimes you need to persevere, and sometimes you need to let go, and don't persevere. Sometimes you gotta allow someone else. It's also a good emotion. And then we have Yesod, which is the middle between the two sides, and Yesod is about bonding. And bonding, just like compassion, is a combination of kindness and discipline. So to bonding with someone else, bonding is a relationship. In order to bond in a relationship, you know what you need? Two things. You need to give and you need to take. You need to sometimes do for the other. You need to be there for the other. Sometimes you need to allow the other to give to you and to tell you what to do and to let the other choose to chart the path of our shared path, right? A healthy marriage can't be one person always in charge and one person always listening. That's a parent to student. It's giving and taking. So we have Netzach is domination, endurance. Hod is submission, surrender. And Yesod is bonding, connection, empathy. So now, my friends, let's go look back at the Seder plate. Netzach is what? What's on the right side? What's on the right side? No, below that. We're on the second segel now. Charosas, which is the mortar, the clay. What is mortar? Bricks. Endurance. They stand 100 years. They're standing there. They don't go away. And that's the idea of the netzach, of the hard work of the Jews to endure. And that's also the apples, which is the endurance of the Jewish woman to persevere and to push and to fight to ensure that the Jewish people would continue producing. What's on the other side of the Seder plate? The vegetable. What is it? What's the emotional attribute? Karpas. And I should have actually put a picture of a person and you would see it. Surrender, submission. Submission. And what's that? A vegetable. What's a vegetable? It grows low on the ground. It's not a big tree. It's not nothing fancy. It's not like the mortar. The vegetable is low on the ground. And then you have the middle of the two, which is the bonding that comes from both the right and the left, from giving and from taking. And that's expressed by the maror again, and the chazeret, which is about feeling for the other person. I know I went too fast. I could have done this better with, it's 10 after. Finally, what do we have? The plate itself, which is Malchus. And this is already a whole other idea. I'm not even going to try. Malchus, I'll say it in 30 seconds. If you get it, you get it. If not, you can think about it. What is Malchus? Kingdom, which idea of the mouth. It receives the whole world and then gives it over. So the king collects taxes and he's the ruler over the people. So what does the plate symbolize? On one hand, the plate is nothing. What is a plate? It's empty. On the other hand, what's a plate? The whole course is on the plate. Or you serve someone a plate that has the meat and the string beans and the potatoes and the kugel, everything's on the plate. That's the idea of Malchus, that it's humble, it has nothing, and therefore it has everything. Anyway, that, my friends, is the story of the Seder plate. I went in knowing that I wouldn't be able to do it all, but I really underestimated it. It's okay. You have a lot to develop and to think about, God willing, during your Seder. If I would have another week, I would do like a 2 parts, but the next week is already Pesach. So there won't be a class next Monday, obviously, because it'll be the Chag. But the Monday after that, I think will be class. It's the day after Pesach. I'm thinking maybe to start picking up someone. I got a request to find ethics of our fathers. That's interesting. I'll choose each week from. There's a custom during the weeks of Pesach till Shavuos to study the ethics of our fathers. Maybe each week I'll choose like one character trait from that week's chapter. Maybe that was a request. Okay. Anyway, happy Pesach to everyone. Akasha Freilich and Pesach. If you did not yet sell your chametz, please make sure you sell your chametz. There's forms right over there on that table. If you need shvur matzah and his matzah, you don't have a place for the Seder, let me know. And yeah, happy Pesach, everyone. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ken. Is this taught in the Tanya, the 10th Surah? Absolutely, it's all over. I don't feel like I did justice to the 10th Surah. I didn't do justice.
Can we have a class?
Tiferet, the spell, I could do a class on it. Yeah, we should do.
A class? Just come back.
We could. Maybe we'll do on the 10th Surah, because also the time of the Surah to Omer is each of the 10. Ooh, maybe that one. The time of Surah to Omer. What did you do during Surah to Omer?
So fun.
We go through the 7 emotions, right? Maybe we'll do that. I don't know if I can do a class in each one. Maybe that might be maybe we can do it because it's sizable for instructional. You can do all one. If you want to really, maybe 3 and 3. I don't know. Okay, we'll think about it.
Yeah.
I'll take feedback. I'm open to suggestions. Okay. Thank you, Art. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, Lori. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Art. Thank you, Ken. Laila Tov, everyone. Happy